Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled, Discovered My Fiancé Was Living a Double Life. I unmasked him at our rehearsal dinner. It all started about 6 months ago. Finn and I had been together for 3 years and engaged for 1. He was charming, successful, and seemed like the perfect catch. We met through mutual friends at a party, and it felt like sparks flew from the moment we started talking. Within a few months, we were inseparable. Finn worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown. He always dressed impeccably in tailored suits, his dark hair neatly styled. I loved the way his blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He was ambitious and driven, often working late or traveling for business. I admired his work ethic, even if it meant we didn't get to spend as much time together as I would have liked. I'm a high school English teacher, so our schedules didn't always align, but Finn made an effort to plan romantic date nights and weekend getaways when he could. He proposed on a surprise trip to Paris, getting down on one knee in front of the Eiffel Tower. It was like a fairy tale, and I was over the moon. We threw ourselves into wedding planning, setting a date for that fall. Everything was coming together beautifully. We booked a gorgeous vineyard venue. I'd found my dream dress, and our friends and family were excited to celebrate with us. Finn seemed a bit distracted at times, but I chalk it up to work stress and wedding jitters. The first sign that something was off came 2 months before the wedding. I was doing some last-minute errands on my lunch break when I spotted Finn coming out of a cafe across town, nowhere near his office. He was with a striking redhead I'd never seen before. They looked pretty cozy, laughing together as they walked down the street. My stomach dropped, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a client or coworker. Still, something about the way Finn's hand lingered on her lower back as he guided her to a waiting cab made me uneasy. When Finn got home that night, I casually asked how his day was. He rattled off some vague comments about meetings and paperwork, never mentioning lunch or the mystery woman. I wanted to press further, but doubt crept in. Was I being paranoid, reading too much into an innocent interaction? I pushed my suspicions aside and threw myself back into wedding preparations. But over the next few weeks, little things kept nagging at me. Finn was spending more time than ever at work, often not getting home until after I was asleep. His normally meticulous grooming habits slipped. Sometimes he'd come home with his collar askew or his hair mussed. Once, I could have sworn I smelled perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine. When I tried to talk to him about it, Finn got defensive. "You're imagining things," he'd say with a dismissive laugh. "You know how crazy things are at work right now. I'm just stressed about making partner before the wedding." I wanted to believe him. After all, we were about to commit our lives to each other. Surely he wouldn't be sneaking around behind my back at a time like this. But the knot of unease in my stomach kept growing. Things came to a head about 3 weeks before the wedding. Finn said he had to go out of town for a conference that weekend. It wasn't unusual. He traveled for work every month or two. But something about this trip felt off. When I offered to drive him to the airport, he got weirdly cagey and insisted on taking an Uber instead. After he left, I tried to busy myself with some last-minute wedding tasks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Call it women's intuition or just plain paranoia, but I knew in my gut that Finn was lying to me. Before I could talk myself out of it, I logged into our shared computer and pulled up Finn's email. We'd exchanged passwords ages ago, but I'd never felt the need to snoop before. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through his inbox. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Work emails, spam, wedding-related stuff. But then I noticed an email address I didn't recognize. There were dozens of emails back and forth over the past few months. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I clicked on the most recent one. "Can't wait to see you this weekend, baby. These secret getaways are getting harder to pull off, but you're worth it. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. I love you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The email was dated just 2 days ago, right before Finn left for his conference. There were photos attached. Finn and the redhead I've seen him with, cuddled up on a beach, kissing in front of a sunset, looking disgustingly in love. My hands shook as I kept digging. There were hotel reservations, flight confirmations, steamy messages going back months. Finn and this woman had a whole relationship going on right under my nose. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the computer in shock. Tears streamed down my face as the full weight of Finn's betrayal hit me. All those late nights at work, all those business trips, how many of them had been lies? How long had he been sneaking around with this other woman while planning a future with me? Part of me wanted to call Finn immediately and scream at him, tell him the wedding was off, but another part of me, the part that still loved him despite everything, wanted answers. I needed to hear it from him, needed to understand how he could do this to me. So I made a plan. Finn was due back from his conference the day before our rehearsal dinner. I decided to confront him then. Give him a chance to come clean on his own. And if he didn't, well, I'd make sure everyone knew exactly who they were really dealing with. The next 2 days were torture. I went through the motions of work and last-minute wedding prep, all while feeling like I was dying inside. I plastered on a fake smile for my bridesmaids and family, not wanting to tip anyone off before I had a chance to talk to Finn. When he finally got home Sunday night, I was a bundle of nerves. He breezed in, all smiles, and gave me a quick kiss. "Hey, babe, how was your weekend? Miss me?" I took a deep breath, willing my voice not to shake. "Finn, we need to talk. There's something I need to ask you, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He looked confused, but nodded. "Of course. What's up?" I locked eyes with him, searching for any hint of guilt or deception. "Is there someone else? Have you been cheating on me?" Finn's face went blank for a split second before he let out a forced laugh. "What? Babe, that's crazy. Where's this coming from?" I pressed on, my voice getting louder. "Don't lie to me, Finn. I know about her. I saw the emails, pictures. I know you weren't at a conference this weekend." Finn's face drained of color. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, clearly scrambling for an explanation. Finally, he sighed and slumped down onto the couch. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Long enough," I spat. "How could you do this to me, Finn? We're supposed to be getting married in 2 weeks. He ran his hands through his hair, not meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen. She and I, it started as just a fling, but then it turned into something more. I didn't know how to end it." I felt like I was going to be sick. "So what? You were just going to marry me anyway? Keep seeing her on the side?" Finn shook his head. "No, I was going to end it with her after the wedding. I swear, Kate, you're the one I want to be with." I let out a bitter laugh. "You've got a funny way of showing it. God, I feel like such an idiot. How long has this been going on?" He hesitated before answering. "About 8 months." 8 months, more than half our engagement. I thought back to all the special moments we'd shared during that time. Cake tastings, dance lessons, writing our vows. All of it was tainted now by his lies. "I think you should leave," I said coldly. "The wedding is off. I'll tell everyone tomorrow." Finn's head snapped up. "What? No, Kate, please. We can work through this. I'll break things off with her for good. I promise. Don't throw away everything we have." I laughed humorlessly. "Everything we have? You mean the mountain of lies you built our relationship on? No thanks. I deserve better than that." He tried to argue, to convince me to reconsider, but my mind was made up. I'd been betrayed too deeply to ever trust him again. Eventually, Finn packed a bag and left, promising to give me some space but insisting we'd talk again soon. After he was gone, I broke down sobbing. How had my life fallen apart so completely in just a few days? I was supposed to be putting the final touches on my vows, not canceling vendors and returning gifts. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as I tried to figure out what to do next. I knew I had to tell everyone the wedding was off, but the thought of facing all those pitying looks and awkward questions made me want to crawl into a hole. Then, around 3 a.m., an idea started to form. Finn had humiliated me, betrayed me in the worst way possible. Why should I have to shoulder the burden of breaking the news to everyone? No, he deserved to face the consequences of his actions head on. The next morning, I sent a mass text to our friends and family. Small change of plans for tonight's rehearsal dinner. Nothing to worry about, just a little surprise for Finn. See you all at 7. I spent the day in a haze, mechanically going through the motions at work while my mind raced. Was I really going to go through with this? Part of me felt guilty for the public spectacle I was about to create. But a larger part, the part still reeling from Finn's betrayal, couldn't wait to see the look on his face when I exposed him for the liar he was. As I got ready for the dinner that evening, I took extra care with my appearance. I wanted to look stunning, to remind Finn exactly what he was throwing away. I slipped on the slinky red dress I bought for our honeymoon and took a deep breath. It was showtime. The rehearsal dinner was at an upscale restaurant downtown. Finn and I had agreed to arrive separately so he could come straight from work. As I walked in, I plastered on my best fake smile and greeted our guests. "Where's Finn?" my mom asked as she hugged me hello. "Oh, he's on his way," I said breezily. "He's got a bit of a surprise coming." Finn arrived about 15 minutes later, looking handsome but stressed in his work suit. He scanned the room nervously before his eyes landed on me. I saw confusion flicker across his face, probably wondering why I was acting so normal after our fight the night before. He made his way over to me, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" he murmured. I smiled sweetly. "Of course, honey, but first I think it's time for a toast." Before he could protest, I clinked my glass to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to us. Finn shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Friends and family," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight. As you know, Finn and I are beyond excited to celebrate our love with you this weekend." Finn relaxed slightly, probably thinking I'd decided to forgive him and go through with the wedding. Oh, how wrong he was. I continued, "But before we could do that, there's something I need to share with all of you. Something I just found out about my darling fiancé here." Finn's eyes widened in panic. He grabbed my arm, hissing, "Kate, what are you doing?" I shook him off, my voice getting louder. "It seems Finn has been keeping a pretty big secret from me. From all of us, really. You see, for the past 8 months, he's been living a double life." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Finn's face had gone pale. "Kate, please, don't do this," he begged. But I was on a roll now, months of pain and anger fueling my words. While he was planning our wedding, picking out china patterns and writing his vows, Finn was also carrying on an affair with another woman. I saw Finn's parents exchange shocked glances. My bridesmaids looked ready to murder him on the spot. All the guests were whispering. "That's right," I continued, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Apparently, our love story wasn't quite exciting enough for Finn. He needed a side piece to really spice things up." Finn tried to interrupt, but I talked over him. "Would you like to tell everyone about her, Finn? Or should I? Should I tell them about the romantic weekends away, the steamy emails, the lies you told to sneak around behind my back?" "Kate, stop," Finn pleaded. "This isn't the time or place." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is this inconvenient for you? I guess you would have preferred I kept quiet, let you marry me while you kept screwing around on the side. Finn's face was beet red now, a vein throbbing on his forehead. He turned to address the stunned crowd. I can explain. It's not what it sounds like. But I cut him off again. Save it, Finn. I've seen the evidence. I know exactly what kind of man you really are. I turned back to our guest, forcing a smile. So, I'm afraid there's been a slight change of plans. The wedding is off, but please, enjoy your dinner. Consider it my parting gift for wasting your time with this farce of an engagement. With that, I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. The room exploded into chaos behind me. People shouting questions, Finn's parents demanding explanations, my mom calling my name, but I didn't look back. As soon as I got outside, the adrenaline wore off and I started shaking. What had I just done? I leaned against the restaurant's brick wall, trying to catch my breath. I didn't look back. My legs felt wobbly as the full weight of what had just happened started to sink in. I guided myself to my car, just wanting to get home after the entire scene. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into the practical task of canceling the wedding, calling vendors, returning gifts, notifying out-of-town guests. It was painful, but it kept me busy and focused. Finn tried to contact me several times, leaving voicemails full of apologies and pleas for another chance. I deleted them all without listening. Whatever we'd had was irreparably broken, and I refused to let him manipulate me into forgiving the unforgivable. My friends and family rallied around me, offering support and distraction. My bridesmaids took me out for a fuck Finn night of dancing and drinks. My parents insisted on taking the financial hit for the canceled wedding, saying it was worth it to see me stand up for myself. About a week after the rehearsal dinner debacle, I ran into the other woman at the grocery store. I recognized her immediately from the photos I'd seen. All long legs and fiery red hair, she looked startled to see me, her eyes darting around nervously. For a moment, we just stared at each other, awkwardly. Then, to my surprise, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know it doesn't mean much, but I truly am sorry for my part in hurting you." I took a deep breath, tamping down the surge of anger and hurt that threatened to overwhelm me. "Did you know about me?" I asked. "That he was engaged?" Sophie nodded, looking ashamed. "Not at first. By the time I found out, I was already in too deep. Finn kept saying he was going to leave you, that he just needed time to figure things out." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, well, I guess he figured it out. Hope you two are very happy together." She shook her head. "We're not. I ended things as soon as I heard what happened at the rehearsal dinner. I realized I could never trust him either. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated by that, but mostly I just felt tired." "Well, I guess we both dodged a bullet then," I said. Sophie nodded. "For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave for exposing him like that. I wish I had the courage to do the right thing sooner." We parted ways after that, and I was surprised to find that some of my anger towards her had dissipated. She'd been wrong to get involved with Finn, but at least she seemed genuinely remorseful. Finn was the real villain in this story. As the weeks passed, I slowly started to heal. There were still moments of intense pain and anger, nights when I cried myself to sleep wondering how I'd move on. But there were also moments of unexpected joy and freedom. I threw myself into new hobbies, taking a pottery class and joining a hiking group. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Finn. I even went on a few casual dates, more to prove to myself that I could than out of any real interest. Yes, Finn had betrayed me in the worst way possible, but in doing so, he'd inadvertently set me free. Free to discover my own strengths, to surround myself with people who truly cared about me, and to build a life on my own terms. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Finn or the wedding or what might have been. Instead, I was excited about what the future might hold. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head on. After all, I'd already survived the worst betrayal imaginable. Whatever came next, I knew I had the strength to handle it. I thought back to that night at the rehearsal dinner when I'd exposed Finn's lies in front of everyone. At that moment, I'd felt nothing but pain and anger. Now, I realized it had been the first step towards reclaiming my life and my identity. Finn had tried to make me the fool in his elaborate deception, but in the end, I'd turned the tables on him. I'd refused to be the victim in his story. Instead, I'd written my own ending, one where I emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. I will always send up a silent thanks to whatever twist of fate had led me to discover Finn's betrayal before it was too late. It hadn't been the happily ever after I'd planned, but maybe it was the wake-up call I needed to truly create my own version of happiness. Here are my thoughts about the story. First of all, can we talk about Kate? This chick's got some serious backbone. I mean, imagine finding out your fiancé's been playing hide the salami with some other girl right before your wedding. Most people would probably curl up in a ball and cry for days, but not our girl Kate. Nah, she goes full nuclear and exposes his cheating ass in front of everyone at the rehearsal dinner. I hope she did theater or screenwriting as a student, because otherwise, that's a lot of wasted potential. And Finn, what a grade A douchebag. I've read about some scummy characters before, but this guy takes the cake. Cheating is bad enough, but to do it right up until your wedding day, that's some next level assholery right there. I hope karma bites him in the ass hard. He's such a liar, too, because no cheater makes it a one-and-done deal. They'll always come back for more if you don't hammer in the consequences, and it's clear that he didn't respect her enough to be faithful. I'm so glad she cut things off with him. But you know what really got me? The aftermath. It's like watching a phoenix rise from the ashes, except instead of a bird, it's Kate's self-respect and independence. The way she handles everything, from canceling the wedding to dealing with Finn's pathetic attempts to crawl back. It's just chef's kiss. And that encounter with Sophie at the grocery store? Talk about awkward. But I gotta give props to Sophie for at least having the guts to apologize. Don't get me wrong, she's still trash for getting involved with an engaged man, but at least she showed some remorse. Unlike Finn, apparently. Don't beg for her to take you back. Genuinely apologize, give her space, and learn your lesson. Some men and some women and people in general. Am I right?
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
Entitled Cousin Stole My Inheritance and Bought a Mansion. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in a close-knit family in a small town just outside of Boston. My parents, Jack and Karen, were hardworking, middle-class folks who instilled in me the value of education and perseverance. But the real guiding light in my life was my grandmother, Evelyn Carter. Grandma Evelyn was a force of nature, smart, vivacious, and generous to a fault. She'd make her fortune in real estate, turning a small inheritance into a multi-million-dollar empire through sheer grit and business savvy. Growing up, I'd spent countless weekends at her sprawling Victorian home, helping her tend to her prized rose garden or sitting in her study, listening to her stories and soaking up her wisdom. But let me introduce the person that started the problems amongst it all. Let me tell you about Catherine. Catherine is my cousin, 5 years younger than me. Where I was the studious, responsible type, Catherine was always the wild child of the family. She had a knack for finding trouble, whether it was sneaking out to parties in high school or dropping out of college to find herself in Europe. Despite Grandma Evelyn's best effort to guide her, Catherine seemed determined to live life on her own terms. Consequences be damned. I remember one Thanksgiving when Catherine showed up 3 hours late, reeking of alcohol and sporting a new tattoo. Grandma Evelyn had pulled her aside, and although I couldn't hear the words, the disappointment in her eyes was clear. Catherine had stormed out, yelling about how no one understood her. It was the last family gathering she attended for years. As for me, I took a different path. Inspired by Grandma Evelyn's business acumen, I studied marketing in college and started my own agency right after graduation. It was tough going at first, plenty of ramen noodle dinners and sleepless nights, but slowly I built a reputation for innovative campaigns and stellar client service. Throughout it all, Grandma Evelyn was my biggest cheerleader. She'd call every week to check on me, offering advice and encouragement. When I landed my first big client, she surprised me with a bottle of champagne and a handwritten note that read, "To my Layla, who's making her own way in the world." I couldn't be prouder. That's why what happened next came as such a shock. It was a crisp spring morning when I got a call from my mom. Her voice was shaky as she delivered the news. Grandma Evelyn had passed away in her sleep. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. How could someone so full of life be gone? The next few days passed in a blur of grief and funeral arrangements. Relatives flew in from all over the country, filling Grandma's Victorian home with subdued conversations and the occasional muffled sob. I threw myself into helping my mom with the preparations, partly out of a sense of duty, but mostly to keep my mind occupied. The funeral was a somber affair, held in the small church where Grandma had faithfully attended services for decades. As I stood by the casket, placing a single white rose on top, I caught sight of Catherine in the corner, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. It was the first time I'd seen her in years, and I was struck by how much she'd changed. Gone was the rebellious teenager with wild hair and ripped jeans. In her place stood a polished young woman in a sleek black dress and pearls. Our eyes met for a moment, and I felt a flicker of the old connection we'd share as children. But then she looked away, her expression unreadable, and the moment passed. After the service, we all gathered at Grandma's house for the reading of the will. The atmosphere was tense, filled with unspoken expectations and simmering emotions. I wasn't expecting much. I figured Grandma's estate would be split evenly among her children and grandchildren. I was in for a shock. The family lawyer, Miss Thompson, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair, pulled back in a tight bun, cleared her throat, and began reading. To my granddaughter, Catherine Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $5 million. The room erupted in chaos. My parents jumped to their feet, shouting about unfairness. My aunts and uncles were red-faced with anger. And me? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could Grandma do this? Catherine, meanwhile, looked like the cat that got the cream. She sat there with a smug smile, basking in her newfound wealth. I couldn't help but notice how her hand shook slightly as she raised a glass of water to her lips, betraying a hint of nervousness beneath her cool exterior. Miss Thompson tried to restore order, her voice rising above the din. "Please, let me finish." Mrs. Carter left a letter explaining her decision. She pulled out an envelope and began reading Grandma's words. "My dear family, I know my decision may come as a surprise to many of you. Over the years, I've watched all of you grow and make your way in the world. Some of you have built successful careers and don't need my financial support. Others, like Catherine, have struggled to find their path. I believe this inheritance will give Catherine the fresh start she needs to turn her life around and make something of herself. I trust her to use this opportunity wisely." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Catherine? Wise? She'd never held a job for more than 6 months. I'd worked my butt off to build a successful marketing agency, always making time to visit Grandma and help her with her business. And this was how she repaid me? Catherine stood up, grinning from ear to ear. Well, I guess Grandma knew best, huh? Don't worry, everyone. I'll make sure to enjoy every penny. The room felt silent, a collective intake of breath at her audacity. My uncle, a usually mild-mannered accountant, was the first to break the silence. "This is preposterous," he bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "Evelyn would never have done this in her right mind." The next hour was a cacophony of raised voices, tears, and accusations. Family members questioned Grandma's mental state, Catherine's influence, and the legality of the will itself. Through it all, Miss Thompson remained impassive, fielding questions with the impractical ease of someone who'd seen their fair share of family disputes. As for me, I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile the grandmother I knew with this bewildering turn of events. It just didn't add up. Grandma Evelyn had always emphasized the importance of hard work and responsibility. She'd been my role model, my confidant, my biggest supporter. How could she have left me with nothing, not even a token of her affection? When I finally found my voice, it was to ask Miss Thompson a simple question. When was this will made? The lawyer consulted her notes. The will was signed and notarized 3 months ago. 3 months ago. My mind raced back, trying to remember anything unusual about that time. That's when it hit me. Grandma had missed our weekly call for the first time in years. When I'd finally reached her a week later, she'd seemed distracted, almost confused. At the time, I'd chalk it up to a bad connection and my own busy schedule. Now I wasn't so sure. The meeting eventually broke up, with most of the family leaving in various states of anger and disbelief. Catherine wasted no time in claiming her prize. She moved into Grandma's house the very next day, started driving her luxury cars, and began spending money like it was going out of style. I watched from afar as Catherine's social media accounts filled with pictures of lavish parties, exotic vacations, and designer shopping sprees. Each post felt like a slap in the face, a desecration of Grandma Evelyn's memory and everything she stood for. Meanwhile, I was left trying to pick up the pieces of my shattered expectations. The marketing agency I'd built from the ground up was doing well, but I'd been counting on a portion of the inheritance to fund an expansion. More than that, though, I felt betrayed, not just by Catherine, but by Grandma Evelyn herself. Weeks passed and I tried to move on. I threw myself into work, taking on new clients and pushing my team harder than ever. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The grandmother who had taught me about integrity and hard work wouldn't have made such a drastic decision without good reason. One sleepless night, as I pored over old photos of Grandma Evelyn, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go without a fight. I owed it to Grandma's memory to uncover the truth. I decided to do some digging. I reached out to Grandma's old friends, her business associates, anyone who might have insight into her state of mind in her final months. Many were reluctant to talk at first, but as I explained my concerns, they began to open up. What I uncovered was deeply disturbing. It turned out that in the last year of her life, Grandma had started showing signs of cognitive decline. A neighbor of 30 years, one that I'd also known for a while, told me about incidents where Grandma had gotten lost on her way home from the grocery store. Grandma's long-lost gardener mentioned how she'd sometimes forget his name or ask him the same question multiple times in one conversation. But the most telling information came from Grandma's housekeeper. With tears in her eyes, she recounted how Catherine had suddenly started visiting frequently in the months before Grandma's death. "It was strange," she said. "Miss Catherine, she never cared before, but then she was here all the time, bringing gifts, taking your grandmother on trips, and she would send me away saying she wanted private time with her grandma." Her words sent a chill down my spine. It was becoming clear that Catherine had taken advantage of Grandma's vulnerable state, but I needed more concrete evidence if I was going to challenge the will. My next stop was Grandma's doctor, Dr. Patel. Getting him to talk was a challenge. Doctor-patient confidentiality is no joke, but when I explained my suspicions of elder abuse, he agreed to speak in general terms. I can't discuss specifics, Dr. Patel said, his brow furrowed with concern, but I can say that Mrs. Carter had been showing signs of consistent with early-age dementia in her last year. We were monitoring the situation closely. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let Catherine get away with manipulating our grandmother and stealing the inheritance. I contacted Miss Thompson and told her what I discovered. Layla, she said, her voice grave, if what you're saying is true, we may have grounds to contest the will. But I have to warn you, it won't be easy. The will is legally binding as it stands, and challenging it will be a lengthy and expensive process. I took a deep breath. I don't care how hard it is. It's not about the money. It's about honoring Grandma's true wishes and holding Catherine accountable. And so began a legal battle that would drag on for over a year. We filed a petition to invalidate the will on grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. Catherine, of course, lawyered up immediately, hiring a high-powered attorney to defend her claim. He was every bit the slick, aggressive lawyer you'd expect. In our first court appearance, he painted me as a greedy, jealous relative trying to steal what was rightfully left to his client. Your Honor, he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, this is a clear case of sour grapes. Miss Layla Carter is simply upset that her grandmother recognized the potential in her cousin and chose to invest in her future. I felt my blood boil at his words, but our lawyer, a sharp young woman, was quick to counter. Your Honor, we have substantial evidence suggesting that Mrs. Evelyn Carter was not of sound mind when this will was made. Furthermore, we believe there was undue influence exerted by Catherine Carter taking advantage of her grandmother's vulnerable state. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Harriet Green, listened to both sides before setting a schedule for evidence discovery and witness testimonies. As we left the courthouse that day, I caught sight of Catherine surrounded by a group of friends laughing and posing for selfies. The sight made my stomach turn. The next few months were a whirlwind of depositions, document reviews, and strategy sessions. We deposed Grandma's doctors, her friends, and her business associates. Catherine's lawyer produced witnesses, caregivers, and neighbors who testified that Grandma had been of sound mind when she changed her will. But we had our own evidence. I'd managed to get hold of Grandma's medical records, which showed a clear cognitive decline in her final year. We also found some of Grandma's old friends who were willing to testify about the changes they'd seen in her and how Catherine had suddenly become a constant presence, keeping other family members away. Throughout the trial, Catherine's true colors came shining through. She already blown through nearly $1 million of the inheritance, buying a mansion in the Hollywood Hills and a fleet of luxury cars. She showed up to court in designer outfits, flaunting her newfound wealth in a way that I knew would have made Grandma cringe. One day during a recess, I overheard Catherine talking to a friend outside the courtroom. God, this is such a drag, she whined, examining her manicure. I can't wait for it to be over so I can get back to Cabo. I've got my eye on this amazing yacht. Her words made my blood boil. This was the person Grandma had entrusted with her legacy. It was clearer than ever that I was doing the right thing by challenging the will. The turning point in the case came to when we managed to get access to Grandma's phone records. They showed dozens of calls to her lawyer in the weeks leading up to the will change, all initiated from Catherine's phone. It was clear evidence of manipulation. When confronted with this evidence, Catherine's cool facade finally cracked. "So what?" she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "I was helping Grandma get her affairs in order. She wanted to change her will. I was just facilitating her wishes." But the jury didn't seem convinced. I saw several of them exchange skeptical glances, and one older woman shook her head disapprovingly. As the trial wore on, I found myself emotionally drained. Each day in court meant reliving Grandma's final months, questioning every interaction, every conversation. There were nights when I lay awake, doubting myself. Was I doing the right thing? What if Grandma really had wanted Catherine to have everything? But then I'd remember Grandma Evelyn as I knew her. Strong, principled, always emphasizing the importance of hard work and integrity. And I knew I had to see this through, not just for myself, but for her. The toll wasn't just emotional. My marketing agency was suffering from my divided attention. I was working late into the night to keep up with client demands, then spending my days in court. My social life was non-existent, and I could see the worry in my parents' eyes every time they looked at me. But I also found unexpected support. Clients who knew about the situation were surprisingly understanding, even offering to testify to my character if needed. My small team at the agency stepped up, taking on extra responsibilities without complaint. And my best friend was a constant source of support, bringing me meals during late-night prep sessions and offering a shoulder to cry on when it all became too much. The closing arguments were a stark contrast between Catherine's lawyer's smooth rhetoric and my own lawyer's impassioned plea for justice. While he painted Catherine as a loving granddaughter recognized for her potential, my lawyer focused on Grandma Evelyn's integrity and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the will's change. The jury listened intently to both sides, their expressions unreadable. The wait for the verdict was excruciating. Hours ticked by as Catherine feigned nonchalance, and I struggled to contain my nerves. When the jury finally returned, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The foreman's words rang out clear and decisive. They found in favor of my claim, concluding that the contested will was made under undue influence when Grandma was not of sound mind. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Gasps, murmurs, and Catherine's indignant outburst quickly silenced by her lawyer. Judge Green swiftly set aside the contested will, ordering the estate to be distributed according to the previous will from 2 years prior. As Miss Thompson began the process of executing that will, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Relief, vindication, and a bittersweet sense of closure. The aftermath was a blur of activity. The previous will, dividing the estate equally among Grandma's children and grandchildren, was read out. Catherine, while still inheriting a significant sum, was far from the sole beneficiary she had expected to be. Catherine's reaction was far from composed. Her furious outburst and threats of further legal action were a stark contrast to the dignity with which Grandma Evelyn had always carried herself. It was a painful reminder of how far Catherine had strayed from the values our grandmother had tried to instill in us. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the long and difficult journey that had led to this moment. The trial had taken its toll on my business, my relationships, and my own mental well-being. But as I sat in Grandma's study, surrounded by the memories of her life, I knew it had been worth it. The inheritance was divided as per Grandma's original wishes. Although it was a substantial sum, I realized that the money itself wasn't what mattered most. What was truly valuable was the lesson Grandma Evelyn had taught me through this ordeal. the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter how difficult the path might be. I decided to use my share of the inheritance to honor Grandma's legacy. I established a scholarship fund for aspiring entrepreneurs, focusing on those who demonstrated the kind of integrity and work ethic that Grandma had valued so highly. It felt like the perfect way to ensure her principles lived on. As for Catherine, the last I heard, she had moved out of the mansion and was attempting to rebuild her life with what remained of her inheritance. Part of me hoped that this experience would be a wake-up call for her, a chance to reassess her priorities and reconnect with the values Grandma had tried to teach us. But I also knew that change had to come from within, and only time would tell if Catherine was capable of that kind of growth. The rest of the family began the slow process of healing. The rift caused by the inheritance dispute had been deep, but as we worked together to settle Grandma's estate and honor her memory, old wounds started to mend. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of tense moments and difficult conversations. But gradually, we began to find our way back to the close-knit family we had once been. For my part, I threw myself back into my marketing agency with renewed vigor. The experience of the trial had taught me valuable lessons about perseverance and standing up for what I believed in, lessons that proved invaluable in the business world. Within a year, we had expanded to twice our previous size, taking on larger clients and more ambitious projects. But more importantly, I found myself approaching life with a new perspective. I made a conscious effort to mentor young entrepreneurs, to give back to my community, and to nurture the relationships that truly mattered. The inheritance war had been brutal, exposing the worst in some family members and testing the strength of others. But in the end, it had also revealed the true value of Grandma's Evelyn's legacy, not in the millions she'd accumulated, but in the values she'd instilled and the lives she'd touched. And as I left the garden that day, I knew that carrying forward that legacy was the greatest inheritance of all. Here are my thoughts about the story. I mean, can we talk about Catherine for a sec? This chick is like the poster child for money changes people. I mean, she goes from barely acknowledging Grandma's existence to suddenly being her BFF. Girl, we see right through you. It's like when your cousin only calls you on your birthday because he knows you got that sweet PlayStation 5. We all know that game, Catherine. And it ain't cute. This isn't just securing the future, like how a lot of people in this scenario like to claim. It's straight up elder abuse, and the only thing I can say to that is a firm don't. But our main character, Layla, now that's a boss move right there. She got that quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout from the rooftops, but gets stuff done. When she decided to fight this battle, I was all in. It's like watching the underdog in a boxing movie, except instead of throwing punches, she's throwing legal jargon and exposing shady phone records. I could almost feel her struggling through the screen, and that hurt me on a weird level. Imagine not only dealing with the grief of a relative's passing, but also fighting with the knowledge that a family member had taken advantage of that same relative in both life and death. Saying it sucks would be an understatement. Now, I gotta say, there were moments in this story where I was biting my nails, like when Catherine's smooth-talking lawyer was doing his thing. I was worried the jury might fall for it. It's like when you're watching a horror movie and you're screaming at the character not to go into the dark basement. Don't fall for it, jury. She's a snake. But man, when that verdict came down, it was so beautiful. It's not often you get to see justice served so perfectly in real life. It's like karma reached down and was like, not today, Catherine, not on my watch. Which, yeah, deserved. What really got me, though, was the aftermath. The way Layla handled her victory was pure class, setting up that scholarship fund, using her inheritance to help others, and honor her grandma's legacy. That's some next level maturity right there. Meanwhile, Catherine's throwing a tantrum like a toddler who got her candy taken away. We can all see just exactly why so many people were skeptical about her wisdom, I suppose. And let's talk about the family healing process for a sec. That shit ain't easy, folks. After a battle like that, most families would be torn apart forever. But the way they slowly came back together, that's the real happy ending right there. It's like watching a broken bone heal. Painful, slow, but ultimately stronger for having gone through it. If all families had half of their willingness to work for reconciliation, then the world would be a significantly better place. But unfortunately, all of us were born into the wrong universe for that to be true.
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.